Hi, everybody, and welcome to this second conversation in a series of Nova 111 talks with none other than Ellinor Jepsson, Head of 5G Innovation Hub at TDC NET and Ericsson. So this conversation, being a part of these Nova 111 talks, will last until 1 p.m. and will be divided into three parts. First, I will give you a brief introduction to Nova and the Nova 111 list, and then we will focus on the reason why we're actually here, the conversation with Ellinor. And the last, of course, will be to have a Q&A at the end of the last 15 minutes. So around 12:45, we will open up for a Q&A at the end. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Niklas Obel, and I have worked at Nova since March of last year, leading the company in the Nordics. And many of you listeners are Nova members, but for those who are not familiar with Nova, Nova is a by invitation top talent network that was born in Sweden in 1997. And today we have 12,000 plus members all over Europe and 7,000 plus members in the Nordics. Our main objective with the Nova network is to connect and develop our members, and also to help them accelerate their development within their careers, and especially help them achieve the highest impact that they can have on business and society at large. The Nova network was born from a talent list called Nova 100, and in 2020 we decided it was time to launch a new kind of talent list, the Nova 111, which is Sweden's first evidence-based talent list, where we presented 10 stars in 11 categories. And why we call this an evidence-based talent list is because these 10 talents have been selected through a very rigorous selection process involving IQ testing, personality tests, as well as video interviews. And each nominee was reviewed by an extensive list of very experienced sort of assessment professionals, both from the HR executive world, senior industry experts, and so on. The jury then selected one outstanding talent within each category, and in this series of conversations, we will have the privilege to meet these superstars. So please enjoy this conversation with Ellinor Jepsson, winner of the telecom and media category. So welcome, Ellinor.
Thank you, Niklas.
Great.
That's something to live up to, superstar. I will strive to do that, I can promise.
You just have to be yourself. So maybe we should start with a brief introduction. Could you start by telling us, about your early years, maybe growing up? I know you had you moved around a lot as a child, and up to university. Please share with us your upbringing.
Yeah, happy to. So I think maybe something that's a little bit, unique about me, so to say, is that we moved around quite a lot as a family when I grew up. So we moved abroad to the US when I was 6. So we moved to North Carolina and I lived there for 6 years. So now I speak with a rather, standard English. When I was younger, it was very Southern and very slang, essentially. So that's developed over time. So lived there for 6 years. Then we moved to France. Then we moved to Switzerland, and then I came back home for high school. So my kind of whole upbringing has been abroad. And then as a result of that, I started in a new class every year. So I think in Sweden it's very common, that you go in the same elementary school, for example, with the same group of people. And for me, that was always shifted around every single year. So I think that's how I grew up.
That is quite amazing. I mean, having had the chance then to experience at least four cultures specifically, I mean, with Sweden, the US, France, Switzerland, and so on. What do you think that has given you?
I think for me, it's more this, that I've always had to restart. So for me, it's not been, something strange. It has just been the way that my life has been. But I remember when we moved from the US, I remember the last day on the school bus when somebody was being a bit worried about, okay, next year we have to start a whole new school. What's that going to be like? I'm a bit scared about that. And I heard my other friends say, oh, but just, think about Ellinor. She's done this every single year. So it shouldn't be that big of a challenge, essentially, was the learning. And then I had that as well when I went to France. And I remember the first day of school, nobody knows anybody else. Everybody's standing a bit quiet in their own corner. Nobody's interacting with anybody else. And I realized, okay, in a month, in 2 weeks, we'll have gotten past this phase and everybody will know each other and we'll be best friends, so on and so forth. So I had this moment on that first day where I just knew, like, okay, if I just go up to people and I just start talking with them, then we can kind of circumvent this whole starting phase, essentially. So I think it's given me, that ability of feeling very comfortable in new, not only social situations, but new situations in general, and daring to say yes to those new opportunities, essentially.
Yeah, learning, that's a very important skill set, I think, through life, and learning that very early on. I guess it's amazing. Can you tell us a bit what the background to your moving around as a family? What was that?
The standard hypothesis is diplomat. That was not the case. So I'm from Gothenburg. So my dad works for Volvo, and he just recently retired. So we moved around because of his career. So that was the reason.
Okay, and when did you finally sort of come back to Sweden for? I know you studied here, but when did you come back?
Yeah, I came back. When was that? 2000. I'm horrible with years, so I guess 2003 or something. I came back and did high school in Sweden, and that was essentially because my parents, there was an opportunity to move again to Switzerland and to be in Zurich instead of Geneva. But I think my parents, they wanted me to have the opportunity of actually feeling like I had some base in Sweden. So I have 2 older siblings, and they both started school in Sweden before we moved out, but I'd never done that. So they wanted me to have some type of anchor, some type of opportunity of continuing in Sweden if I wanted to. So I did high school and university in Sweden, but then kind of during that time and after continued the adventures abroad as well.
So then, I mean, having all this experience, you finalize your high school years here in Sweden and exam. What were your thoughts going into university? Why did you end up studying the thing you did in Gothenburg specifically?
So I studied the Masters of Business Administration in Gothenburg with a focus on corporate finance. And I think for a lot of my friends, it was very clear to them, what they would be doing in their future careers or what they would be studying. And I had no idea at all. I was thinking, maybe I should do psychology because I really like kind of helping other people and supporting them through challenges. There's also, I think, a very, finding solution side of me. So I was also a bit into, like, should I become a lawyer? Should I do that? And I think both of those, they didn't really have, it's a lot more challenging to have an international career, was my understanding then with those 2 professions. So I went during one weekend from not knowing at all what I wanted to do to looking at a few different programs, looking at a few different schools. And I just had this like gut instinct of, yes, this is what I want to do. And that was the Civilekonom, the Masters of Business Administration at the University of Gothenburg. So for me, it was either that or moving abroad somewhere. But I felt this gut instinct of, this sounds really interesting. This is something that I want to do.
All right, cool. If we then fast forward a bit, coming out of university and sort of starting your career is also like, we speak to a lot of those top talented individuals, but even for the most talented people, it's very much like, you don't really know what you're buying into if you, haven't been on an internship in a company where you decide to work and so on. But how did your thoughts go when you were, nearing graduation there in Gothenburg?
I'd had some experience because when I was finishing my master's and when I was writing my bachelor thesis, I was also working full time at Volvo. So I had, some like relevant work experience. But I think it's or maybe it's kind of the same as when I came out of high school. I actually had no idea what I wanted to do. So I really liked like the corporate finance topics that I'd studied, and I'd really liked like that specification, but I had no idea what it was I wanted to do. And actually, as I was writing my thesis, I was speaking with my friend about, okay, should I do another master? I don't know why I was in that track, but I was in that track of thinking I should take another degree. And then as we were sitting there talking, I realized, yeah, but why? What would that give me? It's better for me to go out and start working and getting some experience. And so that weekend I started looking, again, this kind of the same thing as with the university. I started looking at, okay, what are different opportunities? What are different things out there? And of course, I mean, during the studies as well, you meet a few different companies, you get some ideas of what those industries could be like. But essentially that weekend there was a job ad out for Ernst & Young for their corporate finance department. And again, it was kind of the same thing. I read it and I was just like, yep, this sounds really exciting. This sounds really, this is something I want to do. So I applied, and I applied for a few other things as well. But then 2 weeks later, I had the offer from Ernst & Young, and I knew kind of, with my gut instinct that that's what I wanted to do. So I said yes.
And then also moved to Stockholm, I suppose.
Yep. If you're from Gothenburg, there's a bit of a feud with Stockholm, so that decision was not the easiest for me. No. So we moved. My boyfriend at the time, my husband now, we moved to Stockholm, and started our new life there.
Yeah. How was those first years within corporate finance at EY?
Very challenging. I think challenging can be good or bad, right? But I mean, it's when you work in corporate finance, when you're working with due diligence, it's very time intensive. So I mean, you either work on a buy or sell side for a deal, and that could be anything from 2 weeks to 3 months. And if it's 2 weeks, I mean, you need to deliver what you need to deliver to the potential buyer or seller within that time frame. So you work together as a team, you sit in these war rooms, you really like work together to make sure you deliver on that. So of course, it's very long work hours. It's maybe a little bit hard to plan on the private side. So luckily, I mean, my husband was very, very supportive, and we even found like our own kind of communication style, so that he kind of, so he could support me through that work.
And you also had the opportunity to go on as a secondment for I'm guessing here, for a client in terms of EQT, right, in Amsterdam during that time.
Exactly. So one of the reasons I joined Ernst & Young was because I wanted, again, this opportunity of going abroad and having kind of more international experiences. And then I think the challenge was that at the time, I mean, the team in Sweden, we were the market leader. So there was always a lot to do. So there was always hard to take the decision of, sending somebody off to do something else. So I had like not an offer, but we had discussions about going to New York, for example. And then I didn't do that because we had so much to do. So it's better to send somebody from another office. But then EQT wanted somebody specifically from the Stockholm office. So then I'd been, I think, very vocal about that was something I was looking for. So I got the question, and right away I said yes. I didn't even go home and ask my husband. I know that he would support it, and I said yes. And I went to what started as 2 months, then it became 5 months, then it became 8 months working with the EQT team in Amsterdam.
And how's that? I mean, EQT is, of course, for many people, a very well-known private equity company.
How was it in what way? It was a really great, I mean, experience. I really, really liked working with them. And I think for me, it was kind of the first time when you work with due diligence. I mean, you always switch the team that you're working for, and you get to focus on a company for those 2 weeks or those 3 months, and then you switch company. And for me, then, I mean, I could work more long-term with one company that had a portfolio of different companies, and be rather close with that team. So it was nice that you can go there and you really feel like you become part of that team.
And then you make the switch to telecom and media. Had you been exposed to telecoms during your time at EY or at EQT? And how did that come about? Basically, going into that it was a leadership program that you joined, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think It was a bit of I mean, I was working for the team in EQT, and I really liked being there. And we were talking about, extending the work that I was doing. But then at the same time, I mean, if you work in consulting, there is this, up or out type of structure. I mean, you want to continue in the pyramid upwards. So I also knew that I couldn't stay with EQT forever, because then, I mean, it's hard to balance that with the kind of standard consulting career. So I actually then thought about, okay, maybe it's time for me to go do something new. Like I said, more following this one company for a longer time. And Ericsson, for me, it was this whole, like, that it's one of the few, I think, not few global companies, but few Swedish global companies where I think you can really like travel and find different opportunities in different countries. And again, it was the same thing. I saw this job ad for Ericsson. I was it just felt right, what that role was. And I went into the recruitment process. And then through the recruitment process, the manager actually said that, yes, you do this job great, but I think that you should take this role like within the scope of this Accelerate Leadership program that we have. And at the time when I started my career, I rather much meant to not go a trainee track, because I don't want to kind of be defined by, oh, you're somebody who joined this year, or you've been a trainee for this long. I want to kind of be able to form my own career. That might be right or wrong, but it's been my perception from the beginning. Uh-huh. But then I thought that the Accelerate program, as it is a program for people that have worked quite some time, and that if you're going to be in a company for a long time, it's a very good way to create a network, to meet people, to see different parts of the network, network and the company that you might not, it would take a rather long time if you're going to switch roles in that same way. So it was actually my manager who recommended. It wasn't really something that I'd thought about, and now I'm really thankful to her that she did, because I think it has been really, really valuable to the career that I've had.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing start to a very interesting journey that is now 7.5 years and counting in terms of tenure, the years spent at Ericsson. What's been the single most important factor in you staying so long and obviously having a rewarding years at Ericsson?
Challenges, I think, is the very simple answer. So I think when I felt like I'd been in my first role for some time and I wanted to take on a new challenge, I think that first transition was maybe the hardest of, like, how do you go about finding a new opportunity in such a big company? What is it that you want to do? All those questions. And that was a bit difficult. And then, I was also kind of on the verge of going externally. You're also like looking at, what are the external opportunities? Because I don't really know how that worked. But I think the reason that I've continued after that first decision is that there's just been continued new challenges to do, new things to do. I feel very supported. So also, like, Ericsson work a lot with, talent planning, talent management, and you really feel that there's like a proactive HR structure, there's proactive support around you. So it's because I've kept on being challenged, there's kept on being, interesting opportunities to take on, and then time flies very quickly.
Interesting. And today you have the role of heading, the 5G innovation hub between TDC NET and Ericsson. Tell us a bit more what that actually means for us not working in the business.
When you say it, it sounds like a super buzzy word.
It's a long title, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, in Denmark, we have something that's, I think, even like unique on a global scale. So as operators are trying to see, how do we find the new business opportunities related to 5G, related to these cellular solutions, then in Denmark, we have a fully joint team between TDC NET and Ericsson that are working to do exactly that, to see what is it that we can commercialize, how can we help the ecosystem innovate using 5G. And so we have 3 people from TDC, 3 people from Ericsson, and then a shifting lead back and forth between Ericsson and TDC. So it's I think it's really, really unique, because we sit together at the TDC office, where we're together in the same way as any team would be, only that we happen to come from 2 separate legal organizations. So I think, the things that any team would have in managing, how do you deliver in one organization, we have it, but with 2. And then making sure that we keep together very strong there in the middle, essentially.
Sounds like a very interesting way of actually collaborating, because I mean, I suppose the end result of your team's effort will have to be implemented and somehow, integrated into both operations anyway.
So then, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to see what are the new services, what are the new solutions that TDC can implement towards the enterprise market in Denmark. And then also, I think, I mean, there's quite some journey to help companies realize what could 5G be, what could it mean in their operations. So we also do quite a few things, helping them innovate and helping them see what it could be. So like, I don't know, using Boston Dynamics at the airport to do site surveillance, or, cool things like that, if you will.
That was one of my questions. I think we've all heard about 5G, but what is it really that will be different to 4G? What will it actually enable us to do, both from a business to business perspective, like you mentioned here, but also from a consumer perspective? What can we expect? How will the world look in the coming years?
I think if we take kind of, you and me, then what will we see? I think it's very much, that there'll be, that we can use more data, and we can use more data more quickly. So kind of, what does that mean in the new types of ways that you'll be using your phone? If you want to stream something, if you want to do something, that it is that both kind of using data and the type, how much data you can have is going to be a lot better. And then I think for you and me, I think the most exciting thing is also what that means and the types of services we'll see. So for example, 4G that made it possible for, companies like HBO or Netflix or Uber to have services that we can have on our phone. And I mean, we maybe you've tried streaming YouTube if you're at the summer place and it doesn't work, or trying to join some meeting. So I think, people can understand the difference between like 2G and 3G and 4G. And so I think, what that will mean for us and the new services that will come with 5G from an enterprise side, which is of course what I'm very passionate about as well. I think it's very much, how we can digitalize, how we can automate more towards enterprises. So, for example, like we worked with Grundfos on deploying a 5G network in their manufacturing process. And so what does that mean in terms of being able to use like automated guided vehicles, or different, how can you automate the production process essentially? Also working a bit with broadcasting. So before, they'd have to like use like a cabled solution that would take several days to actually set up. And now with a 5G network, as we have a nationwide 5G network in Denmark, then you could actually just use the 5G network and broadcast, which means that you save a lot of that time of actually having to set up, and you can kind of use the data a lot quicker. Could also be healthcare. If you have an ambulance that is able to use a lot of video and able to kind of help the patient even before maybe they get to the hospital. So there's this more seamless kind of handover in the information about the patient and how they should be taken care of. Or maybe then you could do a lot of things kind of in the ambulance, and maybe the ambulance doesn't even need to go to the hospital. So I think it's, in my mind, what I'm passionate about is the fundamentals of how it maybe helps us think differently about the industries around us. And that's a big unknown, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine an Uber before there is an Uber, but what is kind of those new things for enterprises?
It's really exciting to discuss about these things. What do you see in terms of years ahead that we will have 5G access more for and where will it be implemented, both from like you mentioned some of the industries where you see that will be affected from a consumer perspective, where will we see it implemented and in what time?
I mean, I speak very much from a Danish perspective, or that's where I'm working a lot. But I mean, in Denmark now we have nationwide 5G. So then we started rolling it out a year ago, and we already have nationwide, and we have several companies that we work with. So I think then you see a big difference for those users in how that enables the way they can use their phone, or the way they can think about different services, or the different things that we do with companies as well.
Shifting a bit from that topic to leading this joint team then between TDC and Ericsson. What type of leader are you?
I think that's a very hard question to answer. I think the best ones to answer are possibly the people around me. for me, it's very much, I know that I have like really, I have maybe more than most, or I have very high kind of empathy levels. So I really care about, the people around me and what's important to them and what are they like and what drives them, so on and so forth. So I think my leadership style, it changes very much depending on the type of people that I'm leading. So I mean, in the beginning of my career, leading kind of, interns or people are very early in their career, I think then it's very different from now, where I mean, the team that we have, it's a super driven team. Everybody has, a lot of experience, a lot of competence that they come with. And so then for me, it's more about how can I, so to say, like, stand behind them and support them rather than maybe, stand in front of them and show them. So I try to listen in very much to what kind of each person needs. So for example, I don't have like a standard, okay, every Wednesday I have a 30-minute slot with each person. Instead, it's very, based on how each person would like that to be, or how I can help them in the best way.
Okay. I'm thinking also that maybe you do have some tips or tricks for people that have to manage a lot of stakeholders. I can imagine it's sort of the double level, since you are working towards basically two operations there. How is that handling that kind of, it must be a lot of interest from different stakeholders within both Ericsson and TDC, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think that's I mean, if you imagine kind of leading any team and managing, what's the expectations of the team and what should you be doing towards the stakeholders around you, then for us, of course, it is double, because I mean, there's two communication teams, there's two leadership teams, there's two of everything essentially. So of course we try to merge it together as much as we can. So for example, our sponsors and the executive steering group that we report to, which is more the formal side, that's merged between the two companies. But then I think at the end of the day, it's a lot about people relationships and maybe being a bit structured in those relationships. So kind of who it is that you need to engage with, and also maybe having like a structure around, meeting with some frequency or keeping them updated on specific things as you do. So for me, it's trying to be as much embedded on both sides of the organizations as I can be.
How has being a young and successful woman impacted and influenced you throughout your career in what I can only assume is, a rather male-dominated world?
I think the young side hasn't been, I don't know, I'm sure that there has been impacts, but for me, I skipped a year in school, and some people think I look younger than I am, and I've kind of done things maybe quicker than I don't know, you should. So the young side, it's been part of my whole life. I mean, since I was a child, so I'm rather comfortable in myself. And then it's more about managing that perception of people around you. So I think there's been several times that somebody assumes that I'm the intern until they kind of, know a bit what I've been doing, or until I speak, essentially. So managing that perception is one side. I think from the woman aspect, I'm not sure if it's, female or not, but the way it's been for me, I think in the beginning of my career, I was very, back to this, caring a lot about other people and trying to resolve kind of issues. I would maybe be very kind of facilitating or supporting if, there's, you could say like, older man. In my experience, it's been older men who might be, very, angry or screaming or doing kind of different, like political power plays, things like that. So I think in the beginning of my career, I would kind of use that softer side to kind of solve those, those situations and get past them and make sure that we kind of move in the right direction. And I think for the last 5 years, I've realized that I don't need to use that side. It's not maybe up to me to solve those situations, because essentially then you're kind of like letting that happen in a way. So I think in the most recent years, I've actually kind of come to the point that I don't want to facilitate or kind of, be that solving person in that situation, but rather, if they want to scream, if they want to, do some political power plays, then I don't kind of enable it or support it, essentially.
What can you give? What kind of advice would you give though to other women and maybe younger girls coming up through the ranks here early in their career in terms of handling these kinds of situations?
I think it's from my experience, I mean, this is both men and women as you come into your career. And I think I'd say, I mean, dare to be you, dare to be, I mean, who you are. You're hired into the company because you are a talent, because you are driven. So dare to be true to that. And I think also, you know, maybe don't accept if somebody's, you know, behaving in these ways or me being, you know, acting in those ways towards you. So for example, it might seem like a small thing, but like now this year, the code of business ethics in Ericsson, for example, then we've incorporated respect and professionalism as one of kind of the key pillars in that. And I think the more that key talents in the company, the more that people come in, highlight this as an issue and don't accept it, the more we're forced to change. Because at the end of the day, it's hard to get talent, and talents don't want to work in a company or in a section or in a, you know, part of the company where this is happening. So I think dare to speak up and dare to say that you know, you don't accept it, and yeah.
Be yourself, basically, and act professionally.
Yeah.
How I mean, success often comes at the price of setbacks and failure as well. And do you have some experiences from sort of that side that you could share with you know, some memorable setback or mistake or failure that you've experienced yourself, and you know, what you learned from that?
I realized this question for me was actually rather hard to think of, and not because, I mean, everybody has mistakes, everybody has setbacks. It's kind of a standard part of your career, but I think it actually takes some thinking to find those situations, because I kind of see them more as a challenge. So when something happens that could be perceived as a setback or a mistake, I more see it as a challenge that I need to overcome. And then I try to think of, okay, but you know, in the future, in a month, in 2 months, in a year, this won't be a challenge anymore. This will have been solved somehow. So then how, you know, what could that look like, and how do I go about solving it, essentially? So I think maybe some examples, like when I started at Ericsson, and I started in business excellence, it was called at the time, which was a new unit that was being created. After about a year and a half, it was going to be kind of, you know, disassembled and moved into other parts of the organization, so on and so forth. And I think that the team that I was responsible for at the time, you know, they were very worried about, you know, what does this mean? What does this mean for our roles? What does this mean? You know, the future was very, very uncertain. So then I you know, made sure that they felt supported through that, and then try to focus on, you know, what are the things that we can do that we believe actually will have an impact despite where this organization lands in the future. So what are some of the things we can work with that we think are likely would actually kind of survive this time? And so what we worked on then, it's actually something that's still being used in Ericsson today. So that was kind of one learning, for example.
So in that case, basically, you know, working on the things that you could control, basically, in that case.
Yeah.
Speaking about, you know, career and career changes and so on, I mean, you mentioned how you know, how you've been thinking when taking big steps, leaving university and also leaving consulting or corporate finance to go into Ericsson. But how do you think about your career in the longer perspective? Do you make longer plans or dreams, or more jump onto interesting opportunities? Also, I mean, for your internal career at Ericsson, could you tell us a bit about that, and you know, how you think in terms of navigating that?
I think when I studied, or when I was at university, I don't know if this is still the case, but then everybody talked about, you know, oh, you should have a 5-year career plan. You need to know what you're doing in you know, 5 years. And a lot of my friends at university, they thought, okay, I don't know, I want to be. And I think your previous talk had the same kind of topic, but so essentially, you know, like, I want to become a partner. I want to become, you know, top position at this company, and then backtrack to what does that mean, and therefore I need to get this grade on this exam, which I don't think I can do now, so I'm going to wait with taking the exam and then have like a big backlog of exams. And for me, that was like never the case. I was kind of against doing like a 5-year plan, because for me it's that, you know, me in 5 years should have learned quite a lot from the journey that I've had the past 5 years. So if I think that I know what I want in 5 years, it means that I'm not building on the experience that I've gained during that time. So for me, there's more kind of some, you know, drivers or some key concepts that I would like in a career. But then I think if you try to form it too rigidly, you don't I mean, you're not taking into kind of account the learning or the opportunities that can come. Because I think, I could never have said, okay, I'm going to be doing this now in Denmark or anything like that. So I think for me, it's a lot about knowing kind of what you want out of a role and then being open to the opportunity. And of course, kind of, especially like in a big company like Ericsson, making sure that you speak with different people, that you get to know different people, that you get kind of their perspective on what that could be, and that you feel supported, essentially.
That's actually a very wise way of thinking about it, in terms of just like you say, that you will of course gain a lot of experiences, a lot of knowledge during those 5 years that you will not know of today. And but you also say something interesting here that I think Sana was into as well in our latest chat there during the spring, in terms of like at least setting yourself up for to really get those interesting maybe opportunities and so on. Is there any way there that when you say networking internally or so on, that would help you, at least be there when sort of the train leaves the station, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think also, like, I don't know, it is networking, yes, but again, like, I think in university people said, oh, you have to network, you should network, and kind of you should network for the sake of it. And when I meet with different people, in the company or externally, it's not, I don't know, I think it should also be from a genuine place of that there's something you want to learn from them. There's some genuine aspect of why you want to speak with them. So for me, that's kind of a very important side. And then I think just being kind of vocal about what you want to do. So in the same way, that I now, when I took this role, I was kind of vocal with people around me and saying, okay, I've done a lot of these different roles, I've driven turnarounds, I've done, business development, et cetera, but I think it'd be valuable to work closer with a customer. That's kind of what I would like to do in the next stage. And so I met with different people, had coffee with different people to say, what do you think that could be? What are some ideas that you have, not necessarily that they have a role, but they could give some advice or something about how to do that transition. And then that's how I ended up here. So there's a few different ideas around different operators I could work with. And again, this is the one that I felt passionately about. So here I am.
Yeah, but that's actually very interesting. And also, I mean, you mentioned it before as well, that you had been vocal at EY with wanting to do a secondment and getting out. And of course, like if nobody knows, nobody in sort of in power, so to speak, knows what you want to do and what you want to achieve. It's also difficult to get there. So that's,
I think at the end of the day, that's also learning that your career is very much up to you to drive. And I know that people say that all the time, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I think it's one of those things you really, really have to think about, that there's nobody else that's going to kind of come and give you things, just on a plate and say, here you go, do this. Or if they do, then I mean, it's not coming from your intrinsic drive and what you want and so on and so forth. So I think kind of, being very much in the driver's seat for your own career and thinking about maybe not necessarily a specific role, but more what are the things that you would want out of a future career.
Do you have any specific process that you work through when you say, for example, that you arrived at the conclusion that I would like to work closer to a customer, and then I was very vocal about that? Do you have any like internal process that a structured process that you walk through yourself to arrive at, like, what is it that I actually want to gain in terms of knowledge or experience? Not in 5 years, but in the shorter term perspective.
I'm generally a structured person. I think anybody in the team can tell you that I may be overly structured sometimes. But I think when it comes to my career, I think it really is more of I think I have a lot of those thoughts like internally. Like it's not like, okay, good, I want to have more customer exposure, and what is that on a scale of 10 or something like that. So for me, it's more looking at what I've done and then how I kind of want to build on from what I've done. So it's more, I don't know, it's more of not a gut instinct, because of course it does take some reflection and some thinking, but it's more a reflection, and again, speaking with different people, getting different people's perspective on it as well.
Yeah, that's good. What other, I mean, you mentioned a lot of really important sort of personal characteristics, I believe, that has helped you. But are there any personal attributes that you really consider to have been of extra importance for you in your leadership or in your career or in your life?
I think maybe it's drive. Like, just like this, wanting to do something new, wanting to move forward, wanting to, I don't know, it's just this kind of forward motion that I kind of feel intrinsically somehow. And then of course empathy, which is very important to me. So I mean, caring about the people around you, it could be driving a change project and understanding, the emotional side of people, or how that impacts them, and then how you get them on board, or as you're working with a team, anything like that. So just caring very much about the people around you as you do that.
I mean, given your career and busy lifestyle, moving around a lot and so on, how do you manage to find the balance between work and private life?
To be honest, I'm not sure that I do. I think that's kind of been a varying scale across my life. So I mean, I of course, have dinners with my husband at home. We go hiking on the weekends, things like. So of course, I find the balance somehow. But I think also sometimes when you're very focused on solving problems, and you always want to kind of solve one more problem, then it's easy for that to take more and more time. So I try to kind of, for example, like I put blocks in my calendar, like in the super early morning and in the evening, and that actually started when I was working in Texas, because people didn't understand the time difference. So I try to kind of put in a limitation in the amount of time that will be for meetings, because then of course the other things you need to do come on top. And then just trying to have time to disconnect and do other things.
If we look into the future a little bit, what are your aspirations there? I mean, we're not talking about the 5-year plan, as you said that you don't make it, but in general terms, what do you foresee for yourself? Or
I mean, for me, it's very much, taking on kind of, bigger and bigger challenges, or challenges that kind of, develop me further and further. So, bigger leadership positions, bigger area responsibilities, those type of things. And then, as I said, I think it's also very much down to the opportunities that come. So it's very difficult to say, that specific role or that specific area, but I think kind of continuing to grow in the way that I have. And there, I think it's something that I've kind of learned as well. I think kind of people in general talk about, having a role, for 2 or 3 years. But I also think that there's a value in certain phases when it works to actually kind of shorten that time, because the time that it takes for you to kind of come up in a role, to learn, and then kind of, create value, then, you can kind of shorten that as well. So I think that's kind of a learning looking back, but then I think going forward, it's, very much kind of how I can take on bigger challenges, how I can create more value in what I'm doing, to give a very vague answer.
Yeah, but that's actually a great answer. Is there any advice apart from, I mean, many of the learnings that you've shared here is actually very applicable, regardless where you are in your career. But are there any specific advice that you would give to an early version of yourself, or other young, hungry professionals who are early in their careers, to give themselves the best conditions, basically, to develop and grow and reach their full potential?
I think maybe don't focus too much on the, what you should do, and rather, focus more on what you're passionate about and what drives you. Because at the end of the day, I think a lot of people I meet, they are maybe more on the side of, I have this 5-year plan, I want to achieve this, I want to achieve that. And then sometimes they start in a track where maybe they realize that, okay, but I'm actually not really passionate about this aspect of the job. And the challenge then is that either you have to fight that much harder, spend that much more time trying to kind of compete with the people that do have that passion, or it's a good opportunity to kind of switch and see then what is that passion. So I think try to focus less on what you should do or what you feel you should do, and focus more on what are the things that drive you, and how can you kind of continue to build a career and build a momentum on that.
Wise words. Thank you so much for sharing so many great things and learnings and that we can take with us. I think it's time. It's 1:45. Let's go into the Q&A session here and see what kind of questions we have here from the listeners. Here we have one that we actually talked a little bit about. Could you give some advice to girls who today dream of making their way into a world dominated mostly by men?
So I think that's a lot of my career, actually, and I think back to it, but I think like don't dare to be yourself. And I mean, sometimes in those situations, it can be easy to become the more traditional female of being more mediating, being more supporting, taking on like specific type of roles. And I think kind of dare to not do that, dare to be who you are and stand up for who you are, dare to be vocal, dare to kind of to kind of set those boundaries as well. And I think also, I mean, it's also, I think, a lot about support. So it doesn't have to be, a woman mentor supporting another woman. It could be, but also maybe trying to find kind of the people around you that can support you in your career. And as you get further, then also how can you support others that are trying to do the same thing?
Yeah. Here's another one from our listener, Amanda, regarding the 5-year plan. What would you recommend for someone who has not made a professional plan either? And I think you touched a lot about on those things in terms of following your passion and building on that. Is there any other comments on that you would like to add?
I think it's a lot of what I said, and I think kind of essentially like understand what drives you. So understand maybe the things that you find are more interesting. So is it working with people? Is it analytical things? Is it what are the things that you like doing? And then very much, to me at least, kind of daring to take those decisions with your gut, with your inner motivation, and maybe not as much again as what are the shoulds and requirements around you, but rather who are you and what do you want to do?
I have some questions as well regarding that. What areas where do you what areas are you most curious about yourself today?
What is an area?
Anything. It could be everything from going to soccer games to the development of 5G.
I think
what turns on your curiosity and sparkles that?
I think partially it's of course, I mean, what are the future opportunities of 5G? I mean, that's a really big passion of what I'm working with. But to me, it's also, I feel sometimes that kind of 5G becomes the tagline or the buzz or the thing that maybe makes people focus more on how you can digitalize your operations, how you can think differently through a new connectivity type. And it doesn't necessarily need to be 5G. It could be 4G, it could be so many different things, but simply that there is this kind of buzz might make people more kind of interested and more prone to change. So that's one. The other is, I think, I mean, always learning, how you develop and kind of, understanding yourself more. So I don't know, quite a bit of like thinking around, who I am and how I work and trying to, optimize maybe. I don't know if optimize is the right word, but yeah.
So self-reflection and a strong interest, I hear, for the things that you're working with. But are there any source of information or anything that you use a lot to satisfy that need for and that hunger for knowledge and inspiration that you can share with the audience?
I think for me, it's. I mean, I'm always very like interested in learning more and having more information and understanding things that I don't understand. But almost to, I don't know, in a way, not answer the question. So instead of the sources that I look at or how I get this information, to me maybe it's more about like refueling the energy that you need to be able to be interested in these new areas and feel that drive. So for me, for example, it's going out for hikes during the weekend, going out in nature, doing yoga, listening to podcasts, those type of things that help me have more energy to really kind of continue that search.
I'm not letting you off the hook there yet. Any specific podcast that you love listening to?
Right now, so as I'm a bit, financially interested, or that's if from my old days, then I think my standard one is I go out, if it's by myself, I go out like on like a speed walk, and I listen to Plånboken, the Swedish program. I think that's pretty interesting. And then most recently, I've been listening to the Happiness Lab, it's called. So it's a professor from Yale that talks about like the psychological effect of how we think and how we can kind of use that to our advantage, essentially.
That's great. Actually, we'll link to that definitely as well. Another question relating to sources of information, of course. Are there any books that have particularly inspired you that you would like to share with us and recommend us reading?
I think I find that the books that are most interesting are the ones that also kind of give you something. So I actually have a rather hard time like reading stories that are just stories sometimes. So I like to read books that are more, that they give you some new ideas in some perspectives. So be that, autobiographies or kind of more factual books. So a recent one was Thinking Fast and Slow, which is kind of the same thing, that it talks a lot about, the psychological effects and how you can use that in different ways in your life. And otherwise, tons of autobiographies. Rather recent one was called, I think, Against the Flow. So it was by the first woman who sailed around the world against the current on her own. And then she talks about a lot of challenges that she had. So, for example, one point she got stuck in the top of the mast. And I mean, you're out in the middle of the ocean, you're all alone, you're injured, you're on the top of the mast. That kind of, what do you do? So I think those type of perspectives are valuable.
First one is written by Kahneman, if I'm not mistaken, and the second one, do you remember the name of the author?
I do not. I can share.
I might have it here. D. Kafari.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, great.
Maybe.
We can also share that. And then you have actually a question from, I suppose, a former colleague of yours, Jonas Halldén, who says, "Thank you for sharing your story. Our paths overlapped briefly at EY. I'm curious, what learnings do you take with you primarily from the consulting time and working with financial due diligence?"
I mean, Jonas knows this well as well, but I mean, there, like we talked a bit before, you get kind of submerged into a project. You work super intensely with that project, and I think kind of the learning track that you have, right? So yes, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, but I mean, you kind of speed development in a way. So the things that I've learned during that time have been super, super valuable. And I think also kind of this value of switching industries, because I think a lot of that, like, financial knowledge, that analytical capability, it's been very valuable in my future career as well. But otherwise, I mean, those times of really kind of trusting a team. I mean, you're sitting together in a war room, you're playing music, people, it's very social, very happy, that side as well. So I think the importance of having fun and being a good team, even if kind of the facts are that it is very, demanding and very, time requiring, but you get through it together.
Yeah. That makes me almost remember all those consulting years. I was also in consulting. That's actually one of the best experiences. And here, Anna Marin also asked a question. What is the best advice someone has given you related to your professional or personal life, and how did it help you?
Good question. I think something kind of recently was that somebody was talking about, at the end of the day, what would set me apart kind of is my analytical capability or my drive, and so kind of focusing more on that. And so I think kind of sometimes we see maybe ourselves as kind of standard humans or standard people going through kind of the same process, but maybe really kind of understanding what's unique to you and how you use that in your career.
I think that's a very good note to end on. A few minutes ahead of time. I really appreciated the conversation, and I want to thank you so much for being a great great person to have to look up to on this, on our list, and for making time today and for giving some great advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.